Boys and girls, welcome back for another episode on the Steaks with Mates podcast. My name is Joff, your host, and today I'm joined by a very, very special guest. He hails from the land down under, my home country, New Zealand. I want to give a special mention to Max German for coming along on this podcast. He's someone that's been in the carnivore influencer space for a couple of years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, not quite yet. I've been carnivore for a while, but just over a year, I think, in the carnivore space.
Just over a year, but he's taken it by storm, and he's put out some really good content. You've collaborated with the likes of Dr. Sean Baker, and most recently that I've watched, Bella Steak and Butter Gal, and I actually got to meet the man in flesh over at Adelaide last November at the Carnivore conference, the Carnivore Live. Yeah. So, Max, thank you for coming along, man. Pleasure to have you here.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Brother, so, take us back through a bit of a timeline. You know, where you were before the carnivore diet, what led you to the carnivore diet in the first place, and what your experiences have been in the last, year or so.
Yeah. So my carnivore experience is a bit different to everyone else's. Well, I shouldn't say everyone, but different to most people, The majority of people who go on carnivore, it's sort of like a, not last resort, but they have all these issues and they hear about this magical diet, they try it, it completely changes their life. But before I started carnivore, I didn't have any issues. Well, I didn't think I had any issues. So I was always someone who was just, I had moderate energy levels and I had some skin issues. When I was much younger, I had some terrible gut issues where I had to have a month off school. But I resolved that, mostly simply just by, cutting most of the fiber out of my diet along with a few other vegetables. But when I started carnivore, I didn't think there was anything that wrong with me. In the mornings when my alarm would go off, I'd snooze it over and over again till the very last moment, so I had to rush out the door. And throughout the day, my energy was always very average. And then I started learning about plant toxins and all this. And I thought, wow, this stuff's interesting. I don't think I have too much wrong with me, but I'm convinced this is how humans are meant to eat. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. So started the carnivore diet. And then literally within a couple of days, I felt like a new person. I thought I was, the epitome of health. I was, 19 years old at the time. I thought my energy, it didn't seem too bad at the time, but I look back on it now and I'm like, I can't believe I function like that. Whereas in comparison to now, I have so much energy. I'm pacing up and down at the gym. Like I feel like a completely new person, just, energy wise. Now, I mentioned earlier how I had gut issues when I was a lot younger. These resolved, like I'd say about 80%. My gut still wasn't perfect, but, I just figured everyone has some sort of issues. My stomach's a bit dodgy. That's just who I am. But then within, a month on carnivore, my digestion was absolutely flawless. I went from, being this guy who literally had to take months off school because my stomach was so bad. And then even when I had it back to 80%, it still was terrible. But, I just thought, well, it's not that bad. So when I started carnivore, within a month, my energy levels had doubled. I was waking up well before my alarms, which was completely shocking to me. I always thought, I'm not really a morning person. Whereas now I wake up 4 a.m. every morning before my alarm. And yeah, that's another thing, actually. I had skin issues. That was a major problem I did have. But again, I just thought, this is normal. I'm, in my teenage years, everyone has a bit of acne, that's just the way it is. It shouldn't be that way. When we look in third world countries, acne doesn't exist. But I had a bit of acne. And then as soon as I went on carnivore, that went away. So yeah, basically within the course of a month, I didn't have any real, I have to do this. I just thought, this is badass, eating steak and eggs every meal, kind of sound like a gladiator. Let me give this a go. And I had all these changes that I didn't even think were possible. So that's basically my story with carnivore. Not quite as dramatic as what you hear from many people, but yeah, it's really changed my life.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. But before we get back into it, I really want to talk about something I think is very important for health and longevity, and it's about adult stem cells. Did you know that adult stem cells are essential for the repair and renew of damaged and old cells in your body? But here's the catch. As you age, the number of adult stem cells in your circulation decreases. By age of 35, your natural release of adult stem cells can drop up to 45%. By 50, it can drop as much as 50%. and by 65, it can plummet by up to 90%. Fortunately though, there is a solution. There is a product out there in the market that naturally increases the amount of adult stem cells that circulate in your bloodstream. It's by a company called Cerule, and the magical product is called Stem Enhance Ultra. And there's also a bunch of amazing products that Cerule offer that help with the migration of adult stem cells. Now, to check this out for yourself, go click the link below that I'll provide in the video description. And I should also note that you can get your products for free. So check it out, and with that, let's get back to the show. Bro, that's still a freaking kick-ass story, because at 19, man, I wish I would have started at 19. But you got into it, I think it would have just been, when it started to peak in social media as well, eh? Like,
Yeah.
because at that time, a year ago, yeah, you would have had, like, the likes of, Sean Becker already made his content and stuff, Steak and Butter Girl, but who were the sort of top influences at that time for you that made you think, man, this is it, I'm gonna give this a go?
So my first introduction to the carnivore lifestyle was actually Paul Saladino. I was scrolling on TikTok one day and I saw this shirtless bloke, got a bag of spinach in his hand, and he's telling me how this spinach here is toxic. I'm like, what's going on with this? But, I like to think I'm an open-minded person. So instead of, being one of these people who comments, what's this guy waffling about? I listened to it and I was like, that's actually very interesting. Like, I never thought about that. I thought vegetables were this incredible food. And it wasn't like I was naive about nutrition either. I've been right into nutrition since literally the age of 14,
Nice.
And so I listened to this video. I thought, well, that's actually quite interesting. And then one day I was doing law school at the time, and I just come home, I went to sit on my bed. I was meant to be doing, a bit of uni work, but somehow YouTube appeared on my computer. Don't know how it happened. And I saw a video from Dr. Anthony Chafee called Plants Are Trying to Kill You. I was like, you know what? I get the feeling, I think I might know what this is about. Is this going to be about plant toxins? And so I sat there on my bed, and just everything he was saying, it made perfect sense. I was like, that explains a few things, actually. Why do vegetables taste bitter? If they were this wonderful food that provided us with everything we needed and nothing we didn't, why do they have this bitter taste? Why is it that we have to force them down children? Why is it that we have to get an acquired taste in them? Like, it should, if they were so good for us, it should make sense that, when we had these things, they tasted incredible. Our taste buds identified that it's this incredible food, but that's not how it worked. So after watching that video from Chafee, I just, went right down the rabbit hole. I watched every single carnivore video on the internet. I don't think I did any university work for a week or two. But after 2 weeks, I was like, oh my goodness, like, I've found the solution. So I went around, told my friends and family, I'm like, I've discovered it. I've got the secret to life. Everyone thought I was crazy, but I'd watched so many videos. I had the answer to everything. So it was mainly Saladino and Chafee that were the ones who got me onto this way of eating.
That's awesome, bro. Yeah, you know what, Saladino, for all the shit that he cops because of his sort of beliefs and whatnot, he was still, I would say, top influences at the time. If it wasn't him that, if it wasn't for his shorts and reels where he'd talk about plant toxins and stuff, that attracted a lot of people. Now, like, we'll talk about his animal-based approach in a bit, but Chafee as well. Let's give him a big shout out because he's done huge for us in this space. I mean, being in news channels talking about the carnivore diet, crazy, man, crazy. But you just thinking about as well. I'm from New Zealand. I came from New Zealand, and I know you talked about force feeding kids, vegetables that they don't like. When I first came to New Zealand at a really young age, this phrase, fucking wheat bix kids, Kiwi kids, are wheat bix kids.
Yeah.
And I tried this stuff. It was disgusting. It was fucking disgusting. And it took me years until, I got conditioned to it. So, I mean, yes, it's not a vegetable, but the way that they market things, they really do get into your mind and really dig into, marketing tactics to try and get you to like certain foods.
100%. They sell you on the identity. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. Oh, spinach, gives you big biceps like, what's his name? Popeye.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's crazy that now that you look back at it, you think, wow, they really did have to get the subliminal messages in there just for you to like this shit.
And they did a good job of it because, to the average person, when you tell them, broccoli's bad for you, they laugh.
Yeah,
They think you're joking. They think you're crazy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they've done a great job.
They have, they have. I mean,
Mm,
how could you ever conceptualize or think that eating fermented, like the leftover stuff from beer and stuff that they'd ferment from a barrel, put it on some bread and call it Vegemite or Marmite, think that tastes nice. Like,
yeah.
I'm sorry to bag out, like the people here, but bro, when I first came to New Zealand, again, this was one of the foods. I'm like, what the hell is this stuff?
Mhm.
But then, you know, I don't know how it was, but over the years, you just get conditioned to it. It's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy
Mhm.
stuff.
And none of these are like plants that people enjoy. None of them are in their original form. So like
Mm.
even fruit, we can talk about this later, how it's been
Yeah,
manipulated to be a lot sweeter, a lot larger. It used to be it used to be full of seeds, now it has none of these things. Fruit's been manipulated. Fruit's the only plant that tastes good by itself.
yeah,
Even when you look at processed food, it objectively tastes good when you combine all these things together. But if you isolate any of the ingredients from it, it tastes terrible. Obviously,
does.
same with vegetables. If you don't have the acquired taste, which
Yeah,
comes as a survival adaptation, when you eat it for long enough, your body goes, okay, well, we're eating this on a consistent basis. Food must be scarce. If we don't start to semi-tolerate this, then we're going to run out of stored energy in the form of body fat and die. So we better start to like this stuff. But all these plants by themselves, they taste terrible. So
absolutely.
it's a surefire way to know we're not meant to eat these things.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. And if taste isn't, the the factor for you, I mean, now that now that I've been carnivore for some time, I look at some of these plant foods. I'm like, gee, how do you actually look at this stuff without needing to, you've got to really make it appealing to taste, the texture,
Mm,
to everything. Like you've got to do so much to your food. Whereas
mm.
you get a piece of steak or a piece of, lamb, and it tastes good on its own.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, you cook it for a little bit, but yeah, it's just crazy. But hey, let's actually get into the fruit stuff right now, man.
Okay, let's do it.
We mentioned Paul Saladino as a big influence in the carnivore space. However, he's obviously changed his idea around an all
Mm,
meat eating diet to now start including fruits and honey.
mhm.
Now, your thoughts generally, bro. What is going on here? Because it's confusing a fair amount of people who are new to this.
Yeah. So Paul on Carnivore, he ran into a number of issues. He had heart palpitations. He had
Mm.
sleep issues. I'm trying to. He had. I think he had. Yeah. What else did Paul have? He had heart palpitations, sleep issues, and muscle
Oh,
cramps. That was it, right? So
cramps.
basically,
Yeah,
he was having electrolyte issues.
yeah.
Now, what could cause this? A lot of people say, well, it's the carnivore diet. You don't get enough electrolytes. But that doesn't seem to make sense because you look at meat, it's very rich in potassium, it's very rich in magnesium. And, over time, what happens is people gradually need less and less salt. But at the start, if you're putting enough salt on, not many people run to electrolyte issues, after their first couple of weeks when they're adapting. Now, what Paul has is a liver company and a liver
Ooh.
organ, an organ supplement company, which he also eats a lot of liver, but he's taking his own supplements. Now,
Yep.
when you have too much liver, it's very high in vitamin A, and vitamin A can mess with your kidney function, which is what
Yep.
helps regulate your electrolytes.
Yep.
Paul never did a carnivore diet without any organ meats, so that's one issue. And then two, the other thing that Paul was running into regarding his sleep and heart palpitations, like I think a large factor that resulted in this is the fact that he was under eating. Like when you look at the guy, he is so incredibly lean,
Yeah.
and so he got leaner and leaner as time went on carnivore. So whenever I talk to people and they're having these same issues that Paul's having, they're typically people that undereat. So I think that was Paul's problem. One, he's undereating. Two, he's consuming too many organs, and I think that's why he ran into problems. But I think if he just ate a lot more, wasn't consuming all this liver, I think he would have been fine. So that's my thoughts on why he quit. But I do think fruit is a big problem for most people, and we can get into that if you like.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah. I think, yeah, I share the same points as you, man. It's definitely to do with how he approached the carnivore diet with, adding not just organs, but the supplements, bro. Like, if people think about this, we're not just, yes, organs do contain, they're very nutrient dense, but these are concentrated forms as well. On top
Hmm.
of his, you know, diet that already includes organs. So if you can imagine just the levels of vitamin A, like you said, it's going to
Yeah.
deplete a lot of the electrolytes that, um, that in the body. So
Hmm.
this animal based approach, uh, let's dig into this a little bit more. Fruits
Hmm.
in the diet.
Hmm.
You talked about the organs, but the fruits and that side of things.
Yeah.
Should you have fruits? Should you not?
I really don't think people should have fruits. So the argument Paul makes in favor of fruits is that they are the least defended part of a plant. And
Mm.
okay, maybe that's true, but they still do have these defense compounds. So for lots of people, the defense compounds that are in fruit are going to be problematic. In many berries, there's things like tannins, which, these things quite literally, not only do they bind to nutrients, but they bind to our cells. So let's look at autoimmune conditions. It seems to be this, weird phenomena that 1 in 3 Americans get, where by definition your body is attacking its own cells for no reason. But when you look at it in the context of, well, there are these compounds in fruit that bind to our cells, maybe that's playing a part there. I don't know. So that's one problem with fruit, is it does have these defense compounds, which, they're going to bind to your gut, as we know how important the gut is. They say your skin's a
Yep.
reflection of your gut. Many of your hormones are created in the gut. So for
Mm.
one, the defense compounds themselves can cause problems. But two, you know, fruit isn't real. It's been manipulated massively. If you look at ancient
Yes.
drawings of fruit and what it looks like in nature, it's not very sweet. It's full of seeds, and it's a lot smaller too. So how this works is essentially when you grow two plants next to each other, they cross pollinate. And as a result, you get this third version, well, you get variations of each plant that have traits from one another. So what happens is, well, over time, we have done this, for consistently over generations. And as a result, we have all these fruits that look nothing like their original form. So people say, well, fruit tastes good. That's how we know we're meant to have it. The positive taste is, our body's identifying we want this stuff, let's eat it. But if fruit was in its original form, it's not tasty. So that kind of, gets rid of that argument. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to run into weight issues eating fruit for a
Mm.
very long time.
Yep.
On carnivore, what, for most people notice is their appetite just decreases massively. That was one thing for me. I used to be starving at all times, but since going on
Yeah.
carnivore, I seem to never get hungry. So with fruit, because it has all the sugar in it, you get these blood sugar spikes again. And when these blood sugar spikes come down, they don't stop at baseline. They go below baseline. In this state, your body thinks it's run out of energy in the form of stored body fat. As a result, you get ridiculously hungry. So a lot of people, they start to incorporate fruit, and all of a sudden they gain a lot of weight. Now there is a small subset of the population who just have very small appetites, so they incorporate fruit back in, and they start feeling better simply because they've got more total energy in their diet. But maybe that's good for a small select number of people, but you're still having these defense compounds. And with the sugar, our body already creates sugar, carbohydrates break down to glucose. So our
Yep.
body, the cells that need glucose, they already have it in the perfect quantities. Our body has this process called gluconeogenesis. Our body goes through this process. Well, this process occurs inside our body, I should say, called gluconeogenesis, where we create all the glucose we need from proteins, fats, as well as lactate, which is a byproduct of exercise. So the cells that need glucose already have enough glucose in them. So whenever we're consuming this glucose from sugar, what happens is, well, our cells are already full. It's very toxic to have too much glucose in a cell, so they start to lock it out. As a result, your blood sugar, it stays in your blood and your blood sugar elevates. Then for a lot of people, when they're consuming lots of this fruit for a very long time, all this sugar, their blood sugar just gets higher and higher and higher. So for a lot of people, if you incorporate fruit, you're going to gain weight. You're going to start to see your fasting glucose go up. I'm sure your hemoglobin A1C is going to go up too. Yeah, so there's just the list of problems with fruit goes on and on and on. I think I made a video that's about 15 or 20 minutes where I just go into each and every single problem. So I see a lot of problems with fruit, and I just don't think it's best for humans to have it.
Absolutely, bro. And I think I want to highlight that point that some people, like, variations, maybe a small select few people might tolerate fruits. or a certain amount of carbohydrates, but we're talking about a small amount of people, a small
Yeah.
population of people here. For most part, and I'll just speak on my experience. Anytime I add carbohydrates into my diet, like I've been carnivore for nearly 3.5 years.
Hmm.
The weight gain that you say, it happens to me pretty quick. If even if I add a little bit, whether that's to do with the inflammation, the retention of fluids and electrolytes because of the spiking of insulin,
Hmm.
whatever it is, I just can't tolerate even small amounts of
Hmm.
carbohydrates, alone fruit.
Yeah.
But yes, I totally agree, man. It's not something that I think should be a part of the diet, a huge part of it. And
Hmm.
and and Paul, he's talking about having hundreds of grams too. It's
I,
not
I,
just
I,
two.
I sometimes can't understand it. Like for these people who are pre-diabetic and
Yeah,
whatnot, when you're trying to, fix your life, when people for those types of people, and just for people trying to manage their weight, if they eat 300 grams of carbohydrates in the form of fruit,
yeah,
it's not going to end well.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. No, I totally agree, man. Um, so in saying that to you, let's go back into your timeline a little bit. You said you started training. You were quite into nutrition and also training in the gym in your younger years.
mm,
Now, this is a world, or I guess, how shall I put it? There's a big culture, bro science culture, that tells you about how to put on muscle, how you need to eat to put on muscle. But there are huge, huge things that I've learned personally myself that I think these people in this gym culture, the bro science culture, are just doing to themselves that are destroying their metabolism.
mhm.
Let's get into calories.
Okay.
Calories in versus calories out. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts around that?
So, okay. Well, this one here, I actually really like this topic. It's incredibly nuanced, and there's just so much, so much to go on. So, at the end of the day, body fat is stored energy. If you consume more energy than you burn, it's stored as fat, right? That's what Gym Bro 101 is. If you go to your local personal trainer, that's what he'll tell you.
Yeah,
But what no one seems to consider about this, well, actually, I shouldn't say no one. All the guys in the carnivore space, they know this very well. But what all these gym bros seem to forget is how you can affect both sides of this equation, right? So if you're consuming, like, and the easiest way to put this is, okay, well, let's give two identical twins. Let's put one of them on a diet of soy protein bars and I don't know what else, Cheerios. And let's put
yeah,
the other one on 2,000 calories of steak. They can do the exact same workouts, exact same everything. Let's check back on them in a year's time and see who looks better, see who feels better. So intuitively, everyone knows that a calorie doesn't quite equal a calorie. That's the first thing, right? And the thing with how calories are measured is they're done in a closed system. It's a measurement of heat energy. So that's all good and well if us as humans were closed systems. If we were a race car and we're pouring petrol in, sure, that's a closed system. It's a perfect measurement. But when it comes to open systems like us, we don't only use our calories for energy. All of our hormones are built from fats. Protein is what repairs our muscles. So when you're giving yourself these different fuel sources that are being used for bodily functions, it makes absolutely zero sense how people can say that a calorie equals a calorie. And it's like even yeah, the whole calorie argument, it fundamentally is kind of right in the sense like, well, if you eat less energy, you're going to lose weight. But there's so much nuance to it. And the other side of it is hunger. If you have this guy on 2,000 calories, a soy protein bar, and Cheerios, he's going to be
yeah,
starving all day. The odds
yeah,
that he actually gets lean, it's basically impossible. He's going to be thinking about food. His life's going to be miserable. And one day he's going to run out of willpower and go, oh man, I just need to eat more. And he's going to, ruin his calorie deficit. Whereas the guy in 2,000 calories a steak, he's going to feel full. He's going to be building muscle during this time. His testosterone's going to be high. So, this right here is an example of two people eating the exact same amount of calories, even if they're doing the exact same amount of exercise, they're going to look and feel completely different. So the calorie model is definitely a flawed system.
yeah. And the thing that's very scary is that this is like it had this movement or this culture about it's all about calories and calories out isn't
Mm,
stopping anytime soon. It's getting worse.
no.
In my opinion, like I've been I've been training and I've been following the fitness space for quite some time, and the amount of people on social media now pushing this narrative is insane. It
Mhm.
really is. And you know, let's take into consider everyone else's, all the demographics here. Imagine, telling a 50-year-old, middle-aged woman saying it's all about calories in and calories
Mhm.
out. You've got these 18, 20-year-olds telling a 50-year-old saying, just eat a calorie deficit. What about the
Yeah.
poor lady's hormones and all the things that she's going to have to go through?
Uh-huh.
Um,
It's crazy.
they don't understand it. They don't. They
Yeah.
they really don't. And this is, I think this calorie movement is these mob of people. They are very militant, more than the
Mhm.
vegans, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Very much headstrong. It's all about CICO. If you're not you know eating in a calorie deficit, you're doing it wrong. And yeah, and that's
Yeah.
how they make money out of it too. They make these programs where you're just eating not just less, but the quality of foods. Oh yeah, just be in a calorie deficit, have half a cup of salad or whatever it is, and think that they these people achieve weight loss, but at
Mhm.
the expense of what?
Yeah, that's the thing with these people that preach the whole calories in, calories out, every calorie equals the same. They forget that humans have this thing called emotions. We feel
Yeah,
things. If we don't eat, if we're not satiating ourselves with the right kind of foods, you're going to feel hungry. You're going to feel irritable. If
yeah,
you're eating lots of carbohydrates, you're going to have these blood sugar crashes. You're going to be
yeah,
hungry all day. Because we're humans and we feel things, it's certainly not a practical method. If we were robots, then hey, maybe the system, wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm sure the robots would probably get sick too. But,
yeah,
because we have these things called emotions, it's tough, man. And, in studies, they literally get people. And in one group, they'll say to them, all right, we need you to eat this many calories every single day. And the other group, they say, don't track anything, just don't eat carbohydrates or eat very low amounts of carbohydrates. And they don't tell them to limit their food. But come the end of the study, the people in the low carbohydrate group, all they did was, not eat lots of carbohydrates. They weren't restricting themselves. They lose more weight than the people who are trying to force themselves to restrict their portion sizes.
yep, yep.
Yeah,
Definitely
it's
more
insane.
sustainable in a sustainable way too. Like
Yeah.
people don't realize that when you start to actually lower your carbohydrate intake, and the more lower you go,
Mm,
and the longer you sustain it, the less you crave it.
absolutely.
Like,
Hmm.
it's crazy. Like I never ever thought that it, carbohydrates could be that problematic towards your satiety, how you respond to the world, because we were always told that carbs were your main source of energy.
Yeah.
That was that was drummed into my head, you know when I first started learning about health in high school.
Mm,
Carbs are your main source of energy. Without carbohydrates, you will die, which is true in a
yeah.
way. It's true.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned it.
Mhm.
Gluconeogenesis takes care of that.
Yeah.
Um, but then in the bro science world, carbs are energy, bro. You need carbs to build muscle. You need carbs, for intense workouts and to make gains. That's the
Mhm.
other narrative that they push. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts around carbohydrates as a means to, uh, build muscle, your performance? What have you
Mhm.
experienced for yourself?
Yeah, well, for me, I've experienced that on carnivore, I recover a lot better. Like I can do a lot more training. I don't get anywhere near as sore. It's only very frequently that I feel anything. I can train a lot harder. And
Yeah,
yeah, like to be honest, I don't notice too much of a difference other than the fact that I have, more energy level in the gym and that I don't get sore. So it's this whole carb narrative is a lot, it's complete garbage. And when you look at what muscle building is at its most fundamental level, it's you go
yeah,
to the gym, you cause micro tears in your muscles, and then protein comes along, repairs these micro tears, and your muscles grow back slightly bigger and stronger. There's no need for carbohydrates in that process. The argument they
yeah,
make is that, well, our muscles are fueled by glycogen, which is
yeah,
made
yeah,
from glucose. But again, with
yeah,
the gluconeogenesis, we make all the glycogen we need from proteins as well as our own body fats we eat and lactate, which is the byproduct of exercise. And what's interesting is, let's say there was a study that came out and it showed that people who had been on carnivore for a year versus people in a high carb group, tracking who gains the most muscle. So these people actually were fat adapted. There was no, other circumstance holding them back. Even if the people on the high carbohydrate group did gain more muscle, which I don't think would happen at all, but even if they did, let's play this out 10 years. These people are going to be sick. Chances are they're going to be pre-diabetic. They're going to have all this inflammation. Whereas the carnivore people, 10 years later, they're going to be incredible. So this whole, and the people that push this, high carbohydrate, 500 grams of carbohydrates per day people, these guys are on steroids. So when they destroy their natural testosterone levels by causing chronic systemic inflammation, it doesn't matter because they just inject themselves with a bunch more and who cares? Whereas for your average natty gym bro who's not doing this stuff, when you plummet your testosterone levels, you're screwed. In studies, they'll get people. One group, they'll tell them, you got to work out this many times, hard workouts, do whatever you can to gain muscle. And the other group, they say, here, mate, here's some steroids. The steroid group gains more muscle than the people working out hard and training. They're not even doing weights, but they gain more muscle. So that's how important these hormones are. So when all these big influencers who are taking all this gear get online and say, oh, a calories a calorie, doesn't matter, and they tank their own hormones, to them it doesn't matter. But to the average viewer, it's a big problem. So, that's a whole you need carbohydrates, right? It's based on nothing. We're seeing more and more studies coming out of fat adapted athletes, performing better in long distance. I'm sure at some point we'll get, more and more low carb muscle building studies. But, just anecdotally, there's a lot of keto guys, a lot of top natural bodybuilders who are keto guys, complete garbage. This whole you need carbohydrates notion.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's a really good point too about, the average person. If you think about and this is another narrative that they push, this work harder, sort of train hard mentality that you've got to train, 3, 4, 5 times a week, hours and hours and hours on end. Yes, you're going to get a really good physique from that. And I've seen natty, bodybuilders and they've got amazing physiques. But how sustainable do you think that really is in the long term? Just to me, these guys, they put themselves through the grinder to get down to, let's say, under 10% body fat. And they're doing that on a high carb diet. Can you imagine the cravings that you'd be getting?
See, that's the thing
with really good for you. I don't think so.
So that's the thing with all of these fitness guys, right? Is they all have food addictions. And I say this because I was that guy. Whenever I used to get lean on a high carb diet, the second I started bulking, I'd be like, you know what? I'm eating 3,500 calories a day, gaining some mass slowly. I'll be fat in 2 weeks. I just couldn't control myself. That's why you see all these 10,000 calorie challenges and, post-show binges. These guys pretend they're doing it for the camera. They're so addicted to food. And that's why that's why all these guys come the off season. They are this is what happened to me whenever I was on a high carbohydrate diet. Come the off season, I would get very fat, unintentionally, just because I was so addicted to food. I deprived myself for so long, and my body was just starving. Whereas on carnivore, I can stay completely lean all year round. I went on a bulk about maybe 9-10 months back, something like that, and I gained a lot of size. But I was eating ridiculous amounts of food. I was walking around full all day. I was probably eating, if calories are real, close to 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. Whereas, and that was oh my goodness, I was stuffing myself, eating heaps of food very consciously. Whereas in the past, when I, bulked after getting lean, I would eat 4,000 or 5,000 calories, and I'd still be hungry, So it's, all these guys are addicted to food. So that's their problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny you say that because I used to compete in powerlifting too, and making weight for comp. That was you put yourself through the ringer just to make weight, and post comp you're going out, you're doing a binge, and that was something that a lot people might want to disagree with me in this, but that's what a lot of these athletes look forward to. They look forward to these big meals. You look at these boxers, MMA fighters. After they weigh in, I always see on their social medias, they're chomping on, a fucking, triple cheeseburger, a 6-pack of, Krispy Kreme donuts, after weigh-in or after their performance like that. These guys are addicted, and so that
Yeah.
that is the problem I really want to highlight to people. Like, you've got this image of someone who is a competitive athlete, looks, aesthetically to be someone that you think, wow, this guy must be healthy. But me and you both know, like, when you look, that's just superficial. When you
Yeah.
start to look at how it impacts your health long term, it makes you really think, man, this is a dangerous. To me, I think it's a dangerous message to push out to your everyday person. Crazy.
100%, man. It's
Yeah.
very, yeah, and when you look at disease rates, right? If we go back to the year 1900,
Yeah.
cancer, about 6% of people would get in their lifetime. Now it's at 40%. 42% of people will get cancer at some point in their lifetime. So all these bodybuilders who are going calories a calorie. Yeah, well, okay. But what about all these people that are getting these chronic diseases from the foods that you're telling them it's fine to eat? And what's the most insane thing to me is how people don't understand how science works. They think science is this, it's completely correct. It's science, of course.
Yeah.
And so you have all these gym bros online who don't know the first thing about, how any mechanism in the body works. And they go, well, actually, these sweeteners in these drinks, they're safe. They're the most researched, ingredient in the world, and the vast majority of the studies show they're safe. And so who's funding these studies? Well,
Yeah.
obviously the drink company. And what a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people don't understand is that studies don't always appear in the daylight. You are under no legal obligation if you're a private institution to do a study, and if it doesn't give you favorable results, no one sees it. So all you have to
Yeah.
do is repeat the same study over and over again. And chance acting alone, one study's going to find that between the two groups there wasn't much of a difference rather, and it shows that your drink's safe because there's no difference between the group that did have it and didn't have it.
Yeah.
And you repeat this exact same study over and over, keep chucking them in the bin, the scientists are on your payroll, and you keep repeating this process. Next thing you know, you have 50 studies showing that this ingredient is safe, and you have a bunch of people who don't understand how any of this works that will go online and say, look how many studies there are that show it's safe. It must be
Yeah.
safe.
Absolutely.
The illusion of nutrition science.
Absolutely. And this is where I want to give a shout out to Professor Bart K for this, because he's
Yeah,
the one that's
he's
really
the man.
highlighted all. He's the man, and he's highlighted all this in his platform. And the one thing I took from it is that a lot of us don't know shit about science.
Yeah.
I didn't know until I actually started to listen to the professor, started listening to Dr. Chafee, and you start to realize, man, how flawed is nutrition science. You're
Mhm.
right. Like, who do you think funds these big studies?
Yep.
Crazy. Now let's get back into the carnivore diet. What is it in your mind that makes you think that the carnivore diet is the way that we need to eat as human
Mhm.
beings? In your
Mhm.
mind, in your articulation, why do we need to be carnivores?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to look at diet is to look at it through the species appropriate diet lens, which means if an animal has eaten something for an extended period of time, they begin to develop adaptations in order to break down the compounds in that food. Now, if you believe in creation, then God created these animals in that way, right? But whatever way you look at it, animals have certain adaptations which allow them to break down defense compounds. We can look at cows. They have this ruminant stomach which allows them to ferment and break down defense compounds. When cows eat grass, it doesn't affect them. With goats, when they eat grass, they have an enzyme in their saliva which breaks down a defense compound that we talked about earlier called tannins. But with humans, we haven't eaten grass for our existence. We don't have this tannins in our saliva. We don't have the ruminant digestion. And you can look at this with any animal. Whatever an animal is meant to eat, it has the adaptations to break it down. Lions, they have these highly acidic stomachs. Lions obviously eat other animals because meat goes off faster. Because meat goes off faster, they need this acidic stomach to break down the pathogens, the bacteria from that meat. So when it's very clear what an animal's meant to eat just simply by looking at it. And then you can also look at our fossils. Every fossil we find prior to 12,000 years ago, they have the highest nitrogen-15 ratings on the planet. Now this is important because animal tissue has higher concentrations of nitrogen than plant material. And as you go higher and higher up the food chain, what you find is that this nitrogen-15 rating gets higher and higher. And humans, for the majority of our existence, had the highest ratings on the planet. So we know that we were eating meat for the vast majority of our existence. Then 12,000 years ago, we start agriculture. Since then, our brains have shrunk 11%, because we're not getting the right nutrients from animal fat. Our teeth have become crooked. Our average height's gone down. The fossils we found a long time ago, they have very few lesions and markings on them. Whereas the fossils we found the last 12,000 years, they have considerably more lesions and markings. And that's important because lesions and markings on a fossil are what indicates whether or not the person, or well, in the case of animals, that animal had disease or not. So when humans were carnivorous, we were healthy. Now, because we've only eaten plants for a short period of time, when you look at our body, there is no way for us to break down these defense compounds. We don't have the ruminant stomachs, like I said. We don't have these enzymes in our saliva. For cows, they have a process called hindgut digestion, where they have these massive large intestines. They can ferment these plants, break down the defense compounds, and as a result, the defense compounds in the plants that they eat don't affect them. But when you look at humans, all of our characteristics should suggest that we are carnivores. We have these acidic stomachs. To me, the best reason for a carnivore diet is how do we break down plant toxins? There's no answer to that. So the reason carnivore works is because because we're avoiding these plant toxins, which we know cause us considerable harm. And that to me, that's the best reason for carnivore. It's just we can't break down plants. When any other animal eats what it's not meant to eat, what it hasn't eaten for most of its existence, it runs into problems. And I think it's very clear with humans that we've run into a number of problems regarding diet. It's gotten a lot worse since we've started processing these plants and adding chemicals to it. But even back in the year 1900, like I talked about earlier, 6% of people still got cancer. We even in the healthy countries where they do eat plants, right? The healthiest countries on earth, they're only living to 80. Every cell and organ in our body can live to 120. So the healthy countries may be healthy, but compared to what? So that's why I think carnivore works. We're avoiding these things that we're not meant to eat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think this is where nutritional science really comes to, a halt, because it can't explain exactly what we ate as human beings. Whereas the stuff from, looking back in, let's say, the paleoanthropology and the nitrogen-15 studies can tell you exactly what we ate. So, that's awesome, bro. Now, with the carnivore diet today, where do you see this going? Where do you see this trend going? What's in future for the carnivore diet?
Well, the thing about great ideas is that they spread when they work. It's like ChatGPT. It went from not existing to a week later, our mums and grandmas know about it. I didn't drive past any ChatGPT billboards, but what I did have is people saying to me, this diet's incredible, you got to try it. And the same thing happens. Like I started this, I told my parents, I've figured out the secret to life. They looked at me, thought I was a bit crazy. And then a month later, when they see how good I'm feeling, they're like, interesting. And I just kept talking about it, telling them how great I'm feeling. And they're like, all right, we'll try it for a month. They give it a go for a month. They lose all this weight. They're feeling incredible. So they're hooked on it. Every time they eat something non-carnivore after being on it for a while, because your body's not used to it, you're like, oh, geez, I feel how I used to feel. I don't want to feel like this. So they're hooked on it. And then my auntie saw how good my parents were doing. So she tried it. And now like half my friends are very meat-based / carnivore. Like my entire, area, there's so many people who have started carnivore simply just because it spreads due to word of mouth. So for me, I think carnivore will be very big simply because it works. But the one thing that I think will seriously hold carnivore back is food addiction. The number of people I know who have started carnivore and they've quit because Cheerios I don't know about Cheerios, but some cake sounds good. And then they've gone down the binge thing. And, I don't blame these people. That stuff is addictive stuff, man. Like they have teams of scientists who are working to manipulate your brain so you want more of it. So I think that right there is one thing that will really hold it back. But when people get desperate, well, I shouldn't say desperate, but when people get a bit older and, these things start catching up to them and they start it, they get addicted. So I think carnivore should go very far and wide just simply based on how effective it is and how it is the proper human diet.
Yep, absolutely. I think you're right. It is it's trending and it is getting there, but there are going to be some hurdles along the way. The one thing that I think is going to be a huge hurdle for people is the media. I think
Mm,
uh, with the media right now, there's a lot of hate about the
yeah.
carnivore diet. I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you have, but there's a lot of, I guess, ways to twist around the image of the carnivore diet. Cherry picking certain anecdotes to say, "Oh, this guy's oozing cholesterol out of his hands," or "Oh, this chick, she got kidney stones," and it's just not something that's not good for you until that changes as well. Like until the
Mhm,
media start to highlight that people are actually
mhm,
freaking doing amazing on this.
yeah. And the
But
one thing I
yeah,
noticed,
yeah,
sorry,
go
you
on, man.
finish.
No, I was gonna say, man. I think once that happens,
Mhm,
once you start to get mainstream, actual images and actual anecdotes of people by the masses, it's gonna, yeah, and that's why I really appreciate the works of Dave Mack, who
mhm,
does interviews of carnivores worldwide. But once media starts to, like, the mainstream media starts seeing that,
mhm.
I think it's going to be very hard to ignore.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing with carnivore, one thing I notice is that it attracts a certain type of person. Most people that do carnivore, they're critical thinkers. Like the average person sort of, oh well, no, red meat is associated with this negative health outcome. Time and time again we see it. I see headlines all the day. Of course, red meat's bad. All the doctors say red meat's bad. All the nutritionists say red meat's bad. Well, not all of them, but lots of them do. These are the experts. They will know their stuff. But the critical thinkers go, well, how does the world work? Charlie
Yeah,
Munger, one of the greatest doctors of all time, he has a quote which I think about every single week at least, and it's show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And it's like, well, all these education systems, they're funded by the food companies. The studies that these education systems, use, they're funded by the food companies. And for the critical thinkers, they sort of go, well, they put these things together, and then they look at the studies and they go, well, you're including hot dogs as meat in that? Do you have any, any interventional studies or any studies that actually show it's red meat itself, not just increased processed food? And over time they watch more and more videos, and fundamentally they start to grasp how things work, and that these professionals have been led astray. So I think that for the critical thinkers out there, carnivore, it comes pretty naturally to them. But there are certain people who, I've had well, I shouldn't say arguments, but conversations with so many people about carnivore,
yeah,
and often it gets to the point where, like, at the end of it, they have literally nothing to say. Oh, we need
yeah,
fiber. No, we don't. Here's the thing about fiber. Cholesterol's bad for you. No, it's not. Here's why cholesterol's not bad for you. And it gets
yeah,
to the point where they have nothing to say, absolutely nothing to say, but they
yeah,
still refuse to believe vegetables are bad for them. Even Joe Rogan, who's a big believer in carnivore, he still
yeah,
goes, "There's just no way vegetables are bad for you." And Joe Rogan, he's a very critical. Well, he's
yeah,
a critical thinker. So that carnivore really attracts the super critical thinkers, and for those people, it comes straight to you. But the masses who sort of just doodle along in life, maybe for them it may not come so easy.
yeah. But I'm very optimistic it'll get there one day. But as near future, maybe not yet. But it's
Mm,
people like you, Max, that really, do justice and trying to spread information and get people just get this on the radars of everyone. And I think you're really capturing the audience there in your platform.
thank
So
you,
really just want to congratulate you for that because you're doing a great job, man.
thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm sure this podcast is going to do very well, also.
Oh, we'll see how that goes, man. I'm looking forward to seeing the growth in this podcast too. But
It'll be brilliant.
uh, let's cap this off real soon. But couple more questions. What does your diet look like right now? If you don't mind me sharing. Yeah,
Yeah, no
sharing.
worries at all. So, like I talked about earlier, I did the bulk earlier in the year, and I got up to
Yep.
about 87 point something kilos, whereas
Yep.
now I'm weighing about 75 point something. So when
Nice.
I was bulking, I was eating, 4 pounds of meat, which is about a couple kilos of meat a day. Whereas right now I'm eating about 1.1 kilograms of meat, which is what 2.3, 2.4 pounds of meat per day. About
Nice.
5 eggs, and I don't have too much dairy, and I'm doing something called fat cycling.
Yep.
I want to lose maybe 1 or 2 more kilos, just get absolutely peeled.
Yeah.
very close to being there, dropped about 11 kilos. But the main strategy I've been incorporating is called fat cycling. So what I do is every second meal, I will have less fat than, maybe I probably should in order to feel my best. So let's say I wake up for breakfast, I'll have a meal that's, a good amount of fat. Then for lunch, I'll have a leaner meal. And then for dinner, a fattier meal. Then I wake up the next day, the leaner meal to start the day, fatty meal in the middle of the day, so forth, so forth, so forth. And I find that's just a really good way where I can stay satiated. I'm still eating about 250 grams of protein a day, probably between 150 or 100 to 150 grams of fat per day, which probably isn't enough if I was to feel my absolute best. I still feel great, like it's crazy. If I was on any other diet and I was eating this many calories, I would feel terrible. But even in the past, I'm 75.7 kilos. That was what I weighed the other day. In the past, whenever I got around 82, I was starving. I'd feel terrible. All I could do was think about food. I'm well below that, and I still feel incredible. So yeah, that's what I'm eating in a day at the minute with the fat cycling.
Nice, bro. And this is on top of training as well. Yeah, this is with a training regime. You're doing a bit of resistance training, I take it.
Yeah, so I gym basically every day. I take Sundays off, but the reason I train so much is because I love it. It's the highlight of my day. When I go to the gym, it's not like I'm not willpowering my way in there. I'm like, yeah, gym time. Sometimes I'm annoyed that I can't train twice a day. So I just love lifting weights. So that's why I train so much.
Nah, that's awesome, bro. I wish I had that youth. I wish I had that youth back where I could, because I used to train a lot. I was the same too, man. But just life gets along, and you just find you don't have time. But that's awesome, bro. And where can people find you on social media if you don't already follow Max, which I'm sure you guys all are? Tell us your socials.
Yeah, so I've got my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Max German, where I do sort of in-depth breakdowns on certain aspects of carnivore diets. Say one day it might be biggest carnivore mistakes, and then one day it might be how much fat and protein you should eat. It's on various topics in there with more in-depth breakdowns. And then I've also started posting on Instagram, where a lot of it's just reaction videos to, what people are saying online about carnivore, and that's also Max German. Max German Carnivore is my Instagram. So either of those platforms.
Nice. And what's the future for you in the carnival space? Have you got a vision that you see yourself getting into, or any future plans?
Yeah, I just want to keep making videos. I really, really enjoy making videos. I love seeing, the people that, take use from the videos. So I'm just doing what I can to make better and better videos so people enjoy watching them, send them to their friends and try and get this carnival message as far and wide as possible.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, I am enjoying your content and really appreciating the work that you're doing. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time in your busy schedule to come along to this podcast episode. We're going to cap it off from here, ladies and gentlemen. I've got Max German, who's making waves in this community. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Max, for coming along. And we'll see you all in the next episode. All right.
See you later. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, man. Pleasure. All righty.